today's episode of Downstream Outdoors. Today on Downstream Outdoors, we're working on our winter project, which is going to lead up to some fun filming here when summer rolls around. Today, I'm actually working on my fishing spear. Okay. In a prior episode, when we talked about gathering wood at certain times of the year for doing projects like this, you saw me harvest the small beech tree. I have that small beech tree here, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the next step. We're going to start to clean this basically right now, stick up and turn it into a staff, and then we're going to take the next step and turn it into a spear. Okay, for fishing in particular, a spear for fishing. Okay, it's kind of different from what most people would typically think of like a spear for fighting or for taking down large game. This one's going to be directed specifically towards fishing. Okay, so what we're going to do first is when we harvested this, we kind of left some long stickers hanging out here where the larger limbs were at. We're going to go ahead and take them off with our larger knife here. Okay, we're going to trim them down a little bit further. We come from the underneath side whenever it comes to trimming these limbs off, and you'll get a cleaner trim, which is what we're ultimately looking for. We're not going for perfection here. It's just going to be a roughed out spear, basically. I mean, I don't want it to look like a kindergartner went at it. No offense, boy. But we're not going to go super fancy. This isn't a model that I'm going to try to sell or anything like that. This is just more for function than for eye please. Okay, we pretty well got most of our limbs trimmed off there. Now before we go any further, we're going to pull out a little bit smaller knife here, and we're going to debark it. Now, debarking is always easier in the springtime when there's lots of sap flowing through it. The bark's a lot looser. But going back to what we talked about in the previous episode, whenever you harvest here in the wintertime, in the heart of winter, there's less sap in it, and therefore as it dries, it cracks less, it splits up less, and you just end up with a better product all around. So we're going to suffer, and we're going to take the little bit extra work that it'll take today to skin this and make it look a little bit better by skinning it. Typically, I have what they call a drawbar. A lot of people might have seen them used in old movies and such like that for shaping wood and whatnot, and that's what I would typically use. I didn't bring my drawbar today. I just brought a knife, something most people's going to carry anyway. Nothing fancy. It's just, I mean, it is a name brand and everything, but it's nothing fancy. It's not any particular kind of knife. Now, this goes back to our simple knife handling rules. Never cut towards yourself. Never cut in a way that if you slip, you might get injured. And we're not gonna gouge at it. We're just gonna kind of work our bark off. Okay, and you can see the wood starting to come out there. And I'll pause this. I'm not gonna make you watch me skin this whole thing. And we'll come back whenever I'm a little bit closer to being skun out and getting ready to move on to the next step. Alright, well, we got it pretty well cleaned up here. You can see I got it pretty well debarked here. It only took me a couple minutes. Good knife, clean knife. It's not as super smooth. At this point, you know, it's still green wood. We're not going to try to sand this right away. We're just going to try to get all the green woodworking out of the way today. Then we'll take this and put this somewhere nice and dry with some air circulation and let it dry out, and at that point we can sand it down. We can do whatever we want to. We can put a coating on it if we want to. A lot of times I like to rub a little bit of mineral oil into wood, especially wood that's going to be working around water such as this wood. The next step we need to do, if you look, whenever I was chopping these down, you know, I didn't get a real square point on here, so we're going to try to square this point up a little bit. I don't have a saw. Saw would be the ultimate whenever it would come time to trying to square this all up. So what we're going to do is, let's pan the camera down here. We're going to use a technique called batoning. Okay, batoning basically is, we're going to take our knife. You can use a regular hunting knife if that's all you have, but I like my little prang I carry everywhere. Right, we're going to try to find our nice true edge right here. Then we're just going to take another piece of wood, basically a club, and we're going to hit on top of it and drive it straight down through it. And that squared off our end drastically. We're going to go ahead and do that to the other end. All right, good. Okay, as you can see, it's squared off our ends pretty nicely now. Our next step is that we need to actually make the spear end on this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the bottom end of the tree that was closest to the roots. Okay, this is where it's going to be thickest, and it's going to give us the most amount of meat to work with here. Okay, we're going to use our batoning again, but we're going to use it with our smaller knife. Okay, and what we need to do, first thing we're going to do is we're going to make basically a tic-tac-toe pattern on the bottom of our spear here. And it's basically a guideline of where I want my cuts to be. Okay, I'll kind of take my knife and I can just kind of work it down in there. You can see I already got it just stuck in there a little bit with just my hand. Now, we're going to take our batoning piece of wood, just going to tap it down in. And we're looking for, on this particular piece, I'm looking for a 4 to 5 inch cut. Alright, there's one cut. Now we find our mark here, kind of push ourselves into the wood to get started again. Turn our way down in. Okay. Now we're going to go the opposite direction and make the rest of our tic-tac-toe pattern. Okay. And one more. Once again, we're pushing right into her, getting our blade started so that we know it's where we want it to be. Working our way right down into our staff here. You can see it's getting easier the further in you get and the more cuts you get into it. It's getting a little bit easier each time. Okay? And you can see I made a bit of a tic-tac-toe pattern on the end. Now our next step is we've got to spread that out. Because right now we've accomplished nothing. Okay, so we've got to work these out. What we're going to do is we're going to work pieces in under them so that they hold out permanently like this. Then we're going to hold it over the fire, and we're going to heat treat it over the fire, and that'll help harden the wood. Even though it is already a hardwood, it's green. When we heat treat it, we're going to harden the wood, and this improves the strength and vitality. And then what we'll do after that point, then that'll be it for this episode, and we'll move on. We'll have another episode where we complete it. But for right now, let's get this all spread out and ready for the heat treat. Alright, now what we've done, we've taken the next step. You can see there I've used smaller twigs in my cuts to open them cuts up. Okay, and it kind of spreads it out, and it gives it a multi-point spear instead of a single point spear, which greatly improves your accuracy. Now you can see I didn't shape any of my spear points yet. All I did was I just cut them out, and that's a rough spear point at this point. It's completely blunt at the end. We'll worry about shaping that all up later. What we're going to do is we're going to take this raw wood that we've separated like this now. We're going to throw it in the fire over here, just kind of up out of the fire. We don't want it laying down in the coals. We want the flames kind of licking at it a little bit just to heat it up really hard, and it'll harden it up, help us give us a nice good point when we finally carve our points out. So here it goes, right over the fire. You can see it's kind of up out of the fire, but it's still allowed to lick the flames and everything like that. That's exactly what we want. We're just going to let that go for a while. All right, well, we've been heat treating our spear here for quite a while. You can see it's starting to get pretty black. I'm going to let it go for a little bit longer, but that's pretty much it for this episode. The next step for this spear will be it'll have to go back to my place, put in a nice dry place, and allow it to finish drying. At that point, we'll sand her down, clean up the edges a little bit, then we'll put our spear points on. But that's for another episode. And until then, keep your line wet and out of the trees.